Today's guest is Kevin Aldridge. Kevin is the opinion and engagement editor for the Cincinnati Enquirer. I think anyone might wonder how you would approach such a job in the best of times, let alone the polarized climate we find ourselves in today. Fortunately, for the readers of the Enquirer, Kevin seems to take this challenge head on. He is happy to share his thoughtful, well-reasoned opinions with the newspaper's readers, while fully understanding these opinions will often elicit strong reactions, many times in complete disagreement. And while the thoughtful written presentation of ideas and opinions might seem outdated in today's social media world, I encourage our listeners to seek out and read Kevin's thoughtful commentary. As good a read as Kevin is, however, I think you will find that he may be even better in person. Thoughtful, open, funny, and an excellent conversationalist. Getting him off the written page and into the studios was a real pleasure. Here's our conversation with Kevin Aldridge.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Natty Cast. And now to your hosts, Tim Barker, Rex Stull, and Ron Thomas.
Tim, Rex, and I graduated from school together. And I think I kind of gave you the brief overview at a Reds game one day is when this whole thing hatched.
Isn't that funny how these kind of ideas always come together in the most... I was talking to somebody the other day. My cousin, in fact, we were coming back from St. Louis, and somehow or another we got on the conversation about dog racing. And we were just like, I wonder where that idea came up with. Like, were there just two guys sitting on their porch one day and a couple of dogs ran past them and they're like, hey, man, I wonder which one you think's going to win.
Right.
You know, like, you just wonder how these things come up. And so in the strangest ways. Yeah.
Now, wait, Kevin, I heard St. Louis. My wife's from St. Louis. I went to college in St. Louis. What's your connection, or who's St. Louis?
Yeah, so, and I don't know, we may get into this on the podcast, but I and my cousin, we own a semi-pro basketball team in Cincinnati called the Ohio Kings.
Okay.
And our league meeting was this past weekend in St. Louis. And so they've in the last couple of years, they've started combining like their Final Four weekend, championship weekend with the owners meeting. They thought it would be a good way to get owners whose teams might not be good enough to make it to the Final Four to sort of see and experience that weekend and what it looks like. And so they've combined that with the annual meeting that they have. And so that's why we were down there. It rained the entire time we were there. We left last Friday and came home Sunday.
Where do they play an event like that down there? Where do they?
They had it at it was St. Louis Community College was where they hosted it at. Yeah. Usually a lot of times in the minor league spaces, the audiences are not significant enough to fill an arena. Right. So you typically
like a college.
Yeah, exactly. Those are kind of like the crowds that you get. So typically those are the venues that they target for things like that. And
when did
Tim was
the Kings
walk on at Webster? You were walk on at Webster.
I'm D3.
Tim. I mean,
I'm a D3 walk on, man.
There you go.
Okay, all right.
A lot of garbage time, but
Yeah,
I got to suit up.
I played Division III at Wittenberg in Springfield, and
we would have my first year. I went to Otterbein, but then I transferred. So Wittenberg and Otterbein were big rivals.
Yes, they were. I only lasted not quite 2 years. I lasted a season and part of another season, but then I kind of realized that, it ain't a lot of 5'9" guards balling in the NBA.
That's right.
I better start thinking about what I'm gonna do with the rest of my life.
There's only one Muggsy Bogues.
Yeah, exactly. Basketball ain't it. Isn't it?
I know. Mine was I could shoot the three, and then I was like, oh, there's defense. I was like, oh right, I got to play defense.
So where do we watch this semi-pro team play here in town?
So typically our games have been, we play at Cincinnati State Community College. Yeah. But Cincinnati State is undergoing a sort of a reconstruction of their front foyer this year. And so they let us know at the end of this past season that we weren't going to be able to come back next year to play there. So we're actually kind of on the lookout for a new home. Yeah. And so we've been talking to a few different high schools to try to see if our schedule can match up with like that's the thing. The great thing about Cincinnati State was they don't have a sports program there. So
they have a place and nobody living in it.
Exactly. So it worked out perfectly for us. But trying to find a gym, because the league has certain requirements. You have to have locker rooms and showers, and the court has to be of a certain size, and you got to have a 3-point line, and so there are a lot of boxes you have to check off, so you can't just play anywhere.
Right. Right.
And where do I get information? Like if I'm in town, or if I want to see if something's planned, where would I go to look for this?
So we have Instagram and Facebook channels. We are actually, our website, theohiokings.com, is currently under construction. We have a new web manager who's going to be taking over and doing a redesign for it. For what it's worth, you can go on there and kind of see what's on there now, but it won't be the.
When is the season? Like, what is the?
So the season goes from November till about around this time. Okay. So last weekend was the championship weekend, so about early April. This year coming up, they're allowing teams to start in October now, so we actually get to start the season a whole month earlier.
And the age of the people playing?
They go anywhere from 18 to, I think the oldest player that we've had is maybe 35, 36.
Okay, so you really get both sides. Like people come, okay, nice, that's great.
Actually, I don't know if you follow the local high school basketball scene, but Paul McMillan, who played at Woodward, I think a couple years ago, is a pretty good player. His dad actually played. His dad, who was a good player in his own right, and also a coach, he actually played with us a couple of seasons ago. So
that's cool.
Yeah, so we get and he can. We call him New Jack City because he never seen a shot he doesn't like.
Right.
But
that's awesome.
But yeah, so we get a little bit of everything.
When did it come into existence? When did this start? What was your inaugural?
So we've been around since 2019.
Okay.
We got off to a really great start in 2019. We had a lot of support behind us. We were building a great fan base, and then 3 days.
Something happened in 2020?
That's what. So literally our first season, so 3 days before we were set to host a playoff game here in Cincinnati, and we had sold a ton of tickets, the league let us know that they were shutting it down because of COVID. Wow. And so then we kind of went away for a year. And, of course, all of the hard work that we had done building up the team went away. You go away for a year, people forget about you, and a lot of the sponsors some of the sponsors that we had went under. A lot of sponsors coming back out of COVID, they were trying to get their businesses back, and so even those who supported us kind of didn't support us at the same level. We struggle with people getting used to being back in spaces again. That was a big part. Nobody early, right after COVID, nobody was anxious to get into it.
Were people choosing to go and sit in a crowd of people, or be like, you know what, I'm just going to I'm going to go to the grocery store and come back.
And so we just weren't in the public consciousness right after COVID enough to where people were like, hey, I'm willing to risk my health to come see the Ohio Kings play. So we've really been, over the last couple of seasons, just building back to that momentum that we had in the first year, and it's starting to come back. We're growing a little bit every season, and so we're excited about this year coming up, expecting it to be the biggest yet.
Very cool.
I think that's fantastic.
Do you, in addition to your ownership role, do you coach or?
I do not coach, and I don't play. Now there are in minor league sports, you get that. You get some guys who own the team, they coach the team or coach the team, and they may own it and play on the team.
Come off the bench.
So you get some of that in minor league sports. We don't try to run our team that way. I tell my players, if you ever see me in a uniform, then it's over.
Something's going on. Just look around and say, Indianapolis got a team I can go to?
If you see me running out of the locker room, that's your first sign that this has been a failed business experiment right there. So.
Well, one of my all-time, I always tell people, I've been in New York for 20 plus years, and a lot of people I play softball and a lot of other activities, and I'm always repping my Reds gear or FCC. You can take the kid out of the city, but you can't take the city out of the kid. So I'm diehard Cincinnati fan in New York, which a lot of times can be tough. But one of my all-time favorite jerseys is Oscar Robertson's when he played with the Royals when they were in town. And my question to you is, do you think Cincinnati could ever have or try to gain a NBA team, or do you think that ship has sailed?
No, I absolutely think that Cincinnati. I mean, look, Cincinnati is a basketball town. I mean, you've got tremendous support for Xavier and the University of Cincinnati, and then you talk about the high school basketball scene. I mean, that's probably the reason why we bought the Ohio Kings. Like we didn't come into it with the delusion of like trying to become an NBA franchise. We were like, hey, there's plenty to be mined in the minor league spaces. Like we don't have to be that big. So that was not our intention when we started with our team. We were like, hey, if we can make a few $1,000s off of this thing every year, like, and give young kids an opportunity to continue to play.
Maybe, you do it enough, you're going to get some young players that can leap on, for whatever reason didn't make it out, and that you can see them launch into something.
Yeah, absolutely. So admittedly, we didn't come into that, but we felt like Cincinnati was a market that, you could do something.
Sure.
And I certainly believe that on the NBA level. I think, obviously you got to get a better arena like that. The conversations they're having right now, I think, are critical to that, having a venue that, looks the part and can play the part. But
so what do you hear about that? I know what I read in the paper.
Yeah, I know about as much as I read. I read it too. But I think that there is probably enough momentum that something can happen. The big thing will be, what is the appetite that the public has for the public part of it.
Maybe that Bengals situation plays into it too, right? Getting that lease redone, and what's that look like financially?
Right. I think people are not going to be overly enthused for like new tax dollars unless you make a super compelling case for what this arena and this venue is going to be. Now, I'll say a new arena along with a new convention center. Like those are the elements that Cincinnati kind of needs, because, I was talking about this in the wake of the Sundance Film Festival thing. We didn't get that. And, I've been having a lot of conversations with people about like, why would anybody not from here like really want to come to Cincinnati?
Yeah.
It's like we don't have the mountains, we don't have the beaches, we don't necessarily have the monuments or the sort of grandiose things that you might find in other more touristy cities. Cincinnati is just a very nice, sort of quaint little community. If you live here, it's great because there's like so many different and interesting things and people who are here, and you got the topography with the 7 hills, but that's a hard sell to like somebody who's like, why would I want a vacation in Cincinnati for like
at Park City skiing?
Yeah. And so so how do you do that? How do you compel people to come into town when you don't have those things? And I think it's like having like first class events. Like I think the idea behind getting Sundance was a good one because it's an event that you have here that can bring people. The sports scene that we have is big in that, people come into town for the Reds, the Bengals, and FC Cincinnati. You get a new revised convention center, and you can have all kinds of events that are attractive to people, bring in conventions. And so I think an arena that can attract big acts, and entertainment, that's
well, you see it with the touring. Build. I mean, the number of times now where we have to go to Columbus or Louisville or Indy to go see those shows that bypass Cincinnati because of the state of the
and
arena.
Lucas Oil kind of, they did that in Indy because they're hosting, Olympic swimming events they got the combine. That place is being used for everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's kind of what you have to do. Like, I think that kind of has to be a part of your strategy when you just don't have the natural wonders that are going to draw somebody to your town to want to spend, more than a day there. You know, because I ask myself that question all the time. I'm like, if I didn't live here,
what would bring you here?
What would bring me here?
Yeah.
Right.
Like if it wasn't family or work, like why would I want to come to Cincinnati? And I always ask people that question when they come here from someplace else. I'm like, what brought you here?
Did you grow up here?
I did. I grew up in Middletown, Ohio, so about 25 minutes north of here. Steel mill town, kind of gritty blue collar place. But it's much different when I was growing up than it is now because you didn't have Westchester and Mason. They weren't developed kind of like they were. So Middletown was kind of that in between Dayton and Cincinnati hub. You're right there by 75. So it really had kind of a different life, and it was kind of a different community. And the steel mill there was, even though the steel industry was transforming when I was a kid, it was still a big part of the economy of that city. And so I tell people all the time, Middletown, for the size, was an incredibly self-contained city. We had like 5 or 6 movie theaters. Think about that. Like in a town like Middletown, like we had like 3 sit-down movie theaters and like a couple of drive-ins, and we had a mall. We had like 2 malls. Think about that. And one on the downtown, and another.
We can't support one mall today anymore. We got Kenwood, and that's it, right? Pretty much.
I mean, it was just like it was it had a thriving arts community. It had a Sorg Theater, and we'd have this cultural fest that was called Midfest that would bring in, countries from all around the world, and they would have exhibits and dance and performance and in downtown. It was just an incredible community to grow up in, and it is kind of heartbreaking. I think like what a lot of people know about it now is what J.D. Vance wrote about in Hillbilly Elegy, and that's kind of like the perception that people have of Middletown. And I think what is offensive to people who grew up there is that if you've been there around a long amount of time, that's not what Middletown
It's like anything. It's not, and it's also not everything.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Sure, it's part of it now.
Right.
But I think all cities now that are looking to reinvent themselves, and actually it's one of the things I find fascinating about Cincinnati, because we were always more of a white collar industry, versus like a Cleveland.
Right.
Even, Middletown being a smaller example of that, but, that were more blue collar based and went through a lot of that upheaval around, where Middletown, you have one big employer, but then all the ancillary businesses. I mean, that's what causes that, right? That
absolutely.
You can build a movie theater, people have money to go to it. There's jobs, restaurants, and all of the things that happen around something.
Yeah, absolutely. And their corporate headquarters was in Middletown as well. And so you had all of those people who served on boards and communities and ran for the governments in those cities. Like, they were involved. So the AK corporate culture, or Armco corporate culture at that time, was very much a part of the fabric of the community. I mean, you had a lot more mom and pop type businesses. The Walmarts and the Myers of the day when I was a kid, they were much smaller. Their presence wasn't what it is now. And so you had a lot more mom and pop local business owners who, they sponsored the Pee Wee football team or the Knot Hole baseball team. And it was just a real different community feel back in those days that we've lost a lot of, You
see it in Over the Rhine now, though.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's starting back. You look at those businesses in Over the Rhine, which aren't big chains. They're smaller. I love, I think when I back kind of to your initial idea that you were floating out there, what would bring you back? I do think, and that's why it's important to get those people in town. When they come to town, then they're surprised. Yeah. They're like walking around Over the Rhine. They go to Findlay Market. They go down along the waterfront and see what's, happened down there. They go to the banks. All of the arts that we have in this town. Yeah. Like you say, sports.
It's great. Like I said, if you're from here, and that's the thing, it's like you got to be from here to know it. Yeah. And how does Cincinnati do a better job of letting people who are not from here know everything that we know about how great it is? I mean, heck, since I've been back downtown working post COVID, you walk around now, and obviously there are fewer people, walking around downtown now than there was before COVID, but like even the architecture, just like walking, I'm surprised at how much I miss. Sometimes when you're just in a place, you take things for granted, but every now and again, you just kind of stop and look around you, and you're just like, man, there's just like some really great old architecture
that survived here, which didn't in other towns. They got torn down.
Yeah. And it's like that's part of the charm of Cincinnati, but again, how much of that do you get, the folks outside of here know that and appreciate that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Right. I hear it all the time. You know, working with organizations and people that come into town to do, you know, events, to do, you know, productions and things like that. And that's one of the first things they say. They talk about the architecture, and they talk about how surprised they are about the amount of things that are going on. Mm-hmm. And most people do. They get to Over the Rhine, and they do comment on Over the Rhine. It's like, you know, this place is amazing. How was this
Emilio
done?
Estevez bought a condo in Over the Rhine from, you know, his dad was from Dayton, right?
Yeah.
And shot that thing, a movie here, and was like, come buy a condo down here.
Yeah, this is cool.
Yeah. So it's very cool.
It's kind of a catch-22 too, though, because if too many people find out about it, it might change the the charm of it. So it's kind of like, you know, you want some growth, but not too much. You know?
Well, that's what they said. That's what they said about Seattle. It really doesn't rain that much in Seattle. They just said that to keep the California people out.
The Natty Cast is supported by Mad Cheese. Mad Cheese is a completely plant-based, dairy-free cheese and charcuterie shop located in Madisonville. The owners, Cincinnati natives Heather and Reggie Donaldson, handcraft over 30 different plant-based cheeses and meats in their commercial production kitchen behind the storefront. You're invited to stop in and sample the wide array of products, book a curated tasting, or sign up for the new subscription box program, which will feature an exclusive new cheese every month with recipes and board building tutorials. For more, head to Instagram and Facebook at Mad Cheese Cincy or go to www.madcheese.com. And with that, back to the show.
Well, my daughter's been doing movie production work. We're shooting a lot of movies here now, and that film Cincinnati Commission was working on trying to get Sundance here. But kind of through that, you know, with tax credits, they've built up a community of local people here working on them. But it's great to see these people who come in, just like you say. So that brings all these people from somewhere else in town. There's, in addition to the tax credits, I mean, Cincinnati's, that Alto Nights, which just came out with Robert De Niro, Barry Levinson movie. But I mean, shoots as New York, right? All of the old stuff, they can shoot it as New York.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a, you know, there's these different hooks out there to try to, I think, try to bring people in. Talk a little bit about the Enquirer, though. I mean, what you do down there. I mean, we haven't really touched on what you're.
Well, I'm more fascinated. Before we jump on that, I'm more fascinated too. We know that you grew up in Middletown, but then, you know, went to Wittenberg, and then kind of what's going on in Kevin's head at that point? Like when you graduate, were you planning to look for a city? Did you know you wanted to do journalism, or you know, like what? Fill us in on that.
So it was a funny story. So when I went to college, I had always kind of had, like, growing up, this notion that I was going to be a businessman of some type. You know, I used to do, when I was a kid, I was always looking at ways to make money.
Entrepreneurial.
So cutting grass when it would snow. Me and my best friend who lived behind me, we go out and shovel driveways. Sell we buy comic books, then sell comic books. You know, we were just always very entrepreneurial, trying to find any way we could to make a buck and then go spend it on something that we wanted. Right. So I had always envisioned myself and being that kind of person. I was going to be like some kind of Wall Street guy or something like that. Some of the big CEO. No, my dad was a school teacher, and my mom was basically, for the first part of our life, she didn't work. She was kind of a stay-at-home mom, raising the family. And then once I got old enough to go to school, I have 3 older brothers. So once I got old enough to go to school, she decided that, you know, she was going to go give the workforce a shot and try to make herself some money. So she worked in retail. For a number of years. And
this entrepreneurial thing came from somewhere else.
Yeah, well, my dad was a wannabe entrepreneur, but my mom was probably the most risk-averse person on the planet. So, like, my dad would always have these grand ideas of things that he would want to do, and she would always shut it down. I never will forget. There were probably like 100 acres of open land, like, across the street from my house growing up. And my dad always used to say, you know, son, I ought to really buy some of that land over there and of course, and with no vision, and my mom were like, that's never going to be anything. Why would you waste money on that? And then lo and behold, like 20 years later, is like malls and restaurants and everything all over there. I'm like, man, I could have been an heir to some kind of real estate development fortune.
Meanwhile, we're like, Dad, go back to school and teach 7th grade history or whatever.
Right. And so my dad has passed on, God rest his soul, but there are many days that I wish that I had the opportunity to sit down with him and just ask him, like, man, do you ever think about what you could have been, like, if you didn't have so many haters in your family, like killing your dreams? Like, what might that have been like? But
he turned you loose, so that's good.
He did. And my family tells me that all the time. They say, that I am the extension of all of the things that my dad wanted to do but never did. Kind of like,
I think that's kind of the way it is, isn't it? That's actually a good thing, right? Where okay, I didn't get to, but I can instill it in you, and you can now carry that forward.
Absolutely.
What did he teach? What subject did he teach?
He was a 6th grade teacher at a school called McKinley. So he back then, when you teach at grade school, you kind of teach everything. All of the subjects. He also was a principal in Hamilton for a while at a school I don't think that's even in existence anymore. And also, I think I don't want to say whether he had some higher level job in the Monroe school district as well.
Like you mean like in the
I don't want to misspeak and say like he was a superintendent or something, but it was something like in that in that area at one point in time. So he believed in education. He beat that into our heads. That was just a really big thing for him. And he was always a teacher. Like, even when we would get in trouble and do things, like my mom was the disciplinarian. Like, she was the one who was going to give you the spanking or whatever. My dad preferred to talk to you, give you he was the lecturer. And there were many times where like we preferred the spanking to having him sit down, having to listen to him for like 50 minutes tell you, can
I just take my licks and get out of here?
Right? Yeah, exactly.
I got some comic books to go sell. I need to get on the road.
He's like your dad, Rex,
Exactly. My father was a teacher.
Rex's dad, Kevin, fired me in the 9th grade. I was dressing. I was supposed to be looking after the younger kids, and he comes in, and I was goofing off, and he finds a message pad that while you were out, that pink slips, a pink message pad. Mm-hmm. He reads me a new one, and he's like, you know what happens in the real world when this happens? No. And he rips off a pink piece of paper, hands it to me, and says, you get fired and get out and go home. And I share that because what he did the next day, even though I left in tears, but he sat me down and he talked to me.
Nice.
He explained why that happened the way it happened, and it was a learning lesson that to this day I still remember.
Absolutely, those are the kind of things that you remember, though. Seriously,
and learn from.
Exactly. Which is why, like you say, sometimes it's like I'll take the spanking. It's over quick.
Yeah, so none of that. I mean, short of that, didn't have any of that in my background. So when I was in high school, I was really interested in trying to like take business classes. Like I was always kind of well ahead of where I was in terms of what I thought I could do for my age. Like speaking of AK, I remember one time I got it in my mind that I'm probably like 12 or 13. I got it in my mind that I was going to go be a businessman and was going to work at Armco AK. And so I got at 12 or 13, I did a resume, right? I learned how to do a resume, did a resume, mailed a letter to like the CEO there. And I'm like, hey, I'm Kevin Aldridge. Like that meant anything to him. And like, I think I ought to work for you, and I'm interested in coming in. I think I can be an asset. And so the guy was so impressed by it. He actually invited me in for an interview. So my dad went with me, and I had my little briefcase and everything. And,
that is great.
Had my little clip-on tie or whatever I had. And the guy sat down, and he actually, humored me. Took me through an official job interview and that type of thing. And So I was always kind of
that's
like
a powerful thing though when you're that age, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is really great.
huge.
Absolutely. But see, where I was disappointed I didn't get the job, right? I didn't understand what, I don't get it.
It's like they're talking to you from your dad. It's years later that you realize what was going on there. At the time, you're like, wait a minute, I didn't get to get, I'll start at vice president.
Yeah, like my dad's proud. I'm mad I didn't get the, what is he proud of? I didn't get the job, But so I wanted to try to take business classes at my high school, but they didn't offer that. The closest that they had to it was an accounting program that they had. We had like a vocational wing of our high school. So I took as many classes on that as I could, and somehow being a businessman morphed into me going to major into accounting in college because that's what I had done. And then when I got to college, my first year, I did an internship that summer at a bank. I think it was Bank One. They're probably U.S. Bank now or something like that. I don't think.
And this is where
this was in Middletown. So I got involved in like a co-op program that over the summer where you took classes in the morning and then in the afternoon they placed you somewhere. And so that summer I got that internship at Bank One, and I was doing like payroll and accounting stuff there, and I hated it. I said, there's no way I can see myself sitting here every day just punching in numbers and a calculator and all this other.
It's a great way to figure out what you don't want to do.
Yeah. Right? And I was like, I can't see myself doing this for the rest of my life. And so I made a decision like after that, accounting wasn't going to be my career path. And so when I went back to school that next year, that was right around the time I was telling you guys I came to the realization that the NBA wasn't going to come calling for me.
It's not the NBA. It's not accounting. So
yeah. And there was no Ohio Kings that at least that I knew of that was waiting on me after college. So a buddy of mine on the team said, well, look, why don't you go write sports stories for the school newspaper? They need somebody. They're looking for somebody.
Sports and maybe here we can. Right.
Yeah, he's like that way you could still be around the team, be around the guys, that sort of thing. And I was like, why not? I'm not doing anything else. So I had no clue what journalism was.
So no background in writing or anything like that.
So that's another no formal background in writing. But again, when I was in high school. And it's just funny how all of these things come together. Like I used to do a fake newsletter that was kind of like, just sort of like a funny, kind of borderline militant, newsletter that I would
certainly subversive.
So I would do this thing in class just kind of as a lark and pass it around. And one day, my accounting teacher got a hold of one of these newsletters, and I guess because of the level of militancy there, it was very concerning. And so she turned it over to a gentleman who was kind of a mentor for me and said, hey, I saw this. Kevin's doing this.
Borderline intervention situation.
You might want to talk to him about this. And so he pulls me into my office and he's just like, hey, look, man, I appreciate the creativity, but what are you doing, man? You can't be doing stuff like this. So funny thing about this is this guy kept those for like 20 years.
Wow.
And when I came to the Enquirer as the opinion editor here in 2015, he mailed them to me. Didn't call me. He just sent them to me, regular mail one day. And I opened up this envelope, and it's all of these newsletters that I had done. And he wrote. He had a note there that said, like, I knew that you were going to be something. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was going to have something to do with this. And this is why I kept it. And I thought you would be appreciative of it all these years. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, who does that? Like, what? Like, first of all, I can't locate something I put away 2 days ago. This guy kept those for 20 years, which meant that
you didn't keep them for 20 years and you wrote them.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't keep them for like 2 days. Like, after I was done with them. But
that's amazing.
That is.
So I get on the school paper. I at least knew how a sports story had sound from, like, watching Sports Center or reading the papers and stuff like that. And I kind of got into it, and then I decided, you know what, I think I'm going to take a couple of journalism classes at the school, and then I got into it and started learning it, and it was everything that accounting wasn't. It was something different every day.
Yeah.
The pace of it, the sort of the adrenaline that came with trying to get a story, trying to get people to talk to you. It was everything that accounting wasn't, and that was how I kind of, fell into it as a career. I was like, yeah, I could see myself doing this. So when I graduated from college, instead of going to journalism school, which a lot of people recommended, I had used the rest of my summers to do some freelance work for my hometown paper in Middletown. So I had a pretty good portfolio of news clips. Of course, it wasn't groundbreaking stuff. It was like dog shows and all of the stuff.
You got to do the work.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, it was all of the stories that the regular reporters didn't want to do. But I was glad to get them because I just wanted the experience. And so when I graduated, I had a pretty good portfolio of clips that allowed me to just kind of go into the workforce. Now back in those days, even a small paper like Middletown, they were like, you got to have at least a couple years worth of experience before you can come work for us.
This is too big a market for you.
Exactly, right? Now I see all these kids getting hired straight at the Enquirer, straight out of high school. I'm like, man, it must be nice. I had to toil for like 2 years in the newspaper in Xenia before I get a shot.
Did you say straight out of high school?
Or college, I'm sorry, not out of high school, straight out of college. Yeah, they come in and get these premium jobs at these big metros. And I'm like, that didn't happen. Yeah. And plus I wanted to go into sports. And back then, sports guys, they never left those jobs. They'd get in those jobs and they'd stay there. There was a guy at my newspaper, Jerry Nardiello, who was around. His claim to fame was he covered Middletown when Jerry Lucas was there, and they were winning all of those state championships and the undefeated streak. And so Jerry was like 100 years old. He probably wasn't that old, but he was probably close to it.
He wasn't that far off, right?
Yeah, and he was still working there. I mean, like, this is a guy who would write columns like based on memories, and we'd be like, Jerry, you aren't going to go back and like fact check. I remember it. I know I was there. Right. I don't need.
That's when they were doing the Morse code teletypes.
They're still actually using the peach baskets.
Right. Yeah, I don't know who needs notes. I got it memorized. Okay, Jerry. All right, man. Hey, I guess when you've been at it that long, they just kind of let you do things, right? I hope one day that I'll be able to pull that at the Enquirer, where who needs to talk? I don't need to interview anybody. I lived it. I can write about it. So I didn't immediately get the job there, even though I had been freelancing there, and they kind of knew the work. It's kind of like what you were saying. You got to pay your dues. Yeah. So they put in a good word for me at newspaper in Xenia, and the guy who was the editor there was certifiable. I mean, he taught me all the greatest lessons. He taught me how to write on deadline, because he was one of those guys that no matter where you were in the writing process, when he decided you were done with the story, it was his. And so if you had 2 sentences on your computer screen, that's it. He was going to take it and do what he needed to do. And so he was insane. His name was Gary Brock, but he was a great journalist and taught me a lot about the business. And
because he knew what it took to get it from there to the typesetter to the thing to get the print to get out in the.
Absolutely, yeah. I had so much respect. I joke about him being I tell him that all the time. But he was a taskmaster who knew what it took to kind of teach a young kid
how to business. Yeah, how to
the
full arc of that, right? I mean, the whole business.
Absolutely, and so in the 2 years I was there, I won a bunch of awards, and it was that when Middletown was finally like, okay, well,
maybe we should bring this kid up from the minor leagues, right?
Yep. And so they brought me back to Middletown, and I was doing the arts and culture scene, and so I got to cover all of the art show, and that's how I became, really. To develop kind of like an appreciation for the arts and music and things of that nature, like by covering that type of stuff and sitting through performances and interviewing pianists and actors and opera singers and all of these different things that, would come to town. And so I did that for a little while, and then I got promoted to covering county politics. And all of this happened within like a 6-month time frame, because then the Enquirer was expanding their news coverage out into the developing suburbs. That was around the time that Mason and Westchester and all of those areas were starting to grow, and they were interested in, bringing on board people who were familiar.
Right.
With the
And is
area.
this like 2000s?
Yeah, this would have
early?
been probably around 90, 98, 99.
Okay.
That opportunity came up, and so I wound up working at that time. The Enquirer had a bureau out in Tri-County, the Tri-County area that covered the northern suburbs of Cincinnati. So I worked out of there, covering Mason and Deerfield. That was.
And you were now doing more like politics or council meetings?
Yeah, it was kind of like pretty much whatever happened in those communities. It was heavy focus on development, because like then that was where the big development rush, when they were just building
Somebody
things
like your dad actually did buy that land.
Yes, yeah. And I got to write about it. Instead of being the one being interviewed, I got to interview these people who were making all this
When
money.
they bought that land, they were selling it to developers that
Absolutely.
were building stuff on it.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, and it's funny, like now, whenever I drive out through there and I see things that I had written about when they were just concepts on somebody's, design concept, drawing, and now to see these things that have been around for, 15, 20 years now.
Getting redeveloped.
Yeah, right. Is pretty amazing. And so, yeah, I did that for a few years, and then right before the riots in 2001, I got the opportunity to come downtown and work on a new beat, that minority affairs beat that they had been developing. I guess, some of the powers that be had kind of felt, some of the racial tensions had been brewing.
This was just before the riots.
Yeah, this was before it even happened.
So that should probably tell people that people were aware that there were issues that needed to be covered here.
Absolutely. The funny thing about that is that in probably the 6 or 7 months before the riots, we did a survey. The Enquirer had come up with this notion that we wanted to survey Cincinnati about their racial impressions and all of that. And one of the things that we did was we brought together like a lot of the top business people, government leaders, education people all together for a summit. And we had it facilitated by a gentleman by the name, I think his name is Eric Ellis. He helped us kind of run it. And a lot of interesting things came out of that meeting that we used to kind of inform our coverage. But interestingly enough, after the riots, Mayor Charlie Lucan used that same contingent of people we had convened for that. That became just about everybody who we had invited to the table were a part of the Cincinnati Can Commission that he put together in the wake of the riots.
Right.
So I'm not saying that we're going to take credit for the Can Commission.
Right.
Mayor Lucan, or former Mayor Lucan, can speak to that. But I'm just telling you,
It was the right idea.
Yeah,
you brought the right people to the
absolutely.
place to try to do that.
The Natty Cast would like to take this opportunity to tell you about Red Oak Animal Rescue. It is a local nonprofit animal sanctuary right here in the Cincinnati area. If you're looking for a good way to give back to your community and see some cute animals on your feed all at the same time, please head over to Red Oak Animal Rescue on Instagram or Facebook, or check them out at their website, redoakanimalrescue.com. The best way to support Red Oak Animal Rescue is to check out the Patreon page and sign up for a monthly subscription, or click the link to check out some of their adorable merch. Once again, the Natty Cast is very happy to support Red Oak Animal Rescue, and with that, back to the show.
I have a vivid memory. My wife's from the UK, and we were on that back when Delta had a flight from Cincinnati. So we were on a flight from London back into Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. And the pilot came on the thing and something like, well, we're still going to be able to land in town, but transportation might be a little messed up. There's civil unrest in Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. And I remember because we were kind of half asleep and we looked at each other like, what is this guy talking about? Mm-hmm. I mean, I have a vivid memory, like, he is crazy. We didn't hear that, right?
Yeah. And so I did that beat probably for the next couple of years.
Coming in right at, from a reporter standpoint, that's a great time to be in a story like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Not, obviously not great for the city, but from a journalistic standpoint, those are they call it gallows humor a lot of times in different professions, where things that aren't really things to be excited about professionally.
War reporters are going to be excited when they're in a war zone.
Yeah,
terrible thing to
exactly,
be doing, but I mean, if you're in it, that's what you do.
Yeah, so it is the type of news event that you live to be able to have the opportunity to cover, to try to affect your community in a positive way.
And where is your base camp in this? Are you now living in
I'm
Cincinnati
downtown
at the
now.
time? Okay.
Yeah, so I moved from the bureau to that job came with me coming downtown and working downtown.
Were you living downtown then, or did you live?
No, at that time I was still living in Middletown, commuting because Tri-County wasn't that far from Middletown.
Sure.
But once I came to downtown Cincinnati, I had to move to Cincinnati and wound up living kind of like at the foot of Mount Adams, just down from Eden Park, not too far from Eden Park. Found a nice affordable apartment. I probably couldn't afford to live there today with what I was making. Yeah. With what I was making at that time, I probably couldn't afford to live there today. But got fortunate enough to find a little apartment down there. So so did that for a couple of years, covered that story. And then after that, I probably worked for a couple more years at the Enquirer, and then I had an opportunity to leave and go work for Cox Media Group, which owns the Dayton Daily News. An opportunity came for me to go back. They also own the Middletown paper, which I had never thought I would wind up back there again. But a gentleman wanted me to come and run that newspaper there, and I had never,
like a big promotion.
Yeah. So it was a management job. So I was nervous about that, but I was like, how cool is it to go back and sort of like run your hometown paper?
Did you have to live in Dayton then, or?
No, I actually. So it's funny. It's like every time I would get a opportunity, like shortly after that, another opportunity would come along where I had to move back to where I just moved from. So there was like a period of time where I was just like moving back and forth between Middletown.
And always living in the wrong place. Now I'm commuting the wrong way.
Right. Yeah. My career just worked out like that. Every time I would, and my wife would joke eventually at a certain point, she was like, okay. She was like, I guess we're going to have to get ready to move here in about 6 or 7 months because
you're living and working in the same place.
So I went there.
Is your wife from Cincinnati?
She is. She grew up in Finneytown. Yeah, grew up in Finneytown. And worked there. I was there for about 10 years in various capacities, not all of them in Middletown. In fact, I probably spent like a year and a half stint on an opinion page redesign for the Dayton Daily News. So I left Middletown to go work for the Dayton Daily News to help them in this project of developing what opinion should look like, sort of the new era of opinions.
New version of it,
And so worked with a couple of guys that I respected a lot. That was a big part of being able to work with them. And so we did that for a year and a half and surveyed and went through a whole bunch of things and redid that. And then after we got done with that, they were like, hey, you know what? We're thinking about shutting down all of these newspapers that we own in northern Cincinnati, Middletown, Hamilton. They had probably about 7 or 8, weekly newspapers in different communities. And we're thinking about taking all of those and merging them into one big kind of Butler, Warren County newspaper. And we want you to head up that project because, you've got credibility down there. People know you. And the news will go over less harshly if it's coming from you than
somebody who comes from the area is telling them, hey,
So it's part. Yeah, we think you've got the skills and the talent to do it, and the other part is we think you can better take all of the slings and arrows. Right? Yeah, you can sell it. They won't hurt you as much as they will.
Entrepreneurial spirit's coming back. You got to go sell this to people. And be like, you're doing what?
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, why not? I'm always up for a new challenge, and so. I did that, got that off the ground, and then ran that for like a couple of years. And then the gentleman who had initially hired me at the Enquirer came back as the president and publisher of the paper. And he said, hey, thinking about putting the band back together, and you were one of the first people I thought about. Would you be interested in coming back and being our deputy opinion editor? And so about that time, my wife was sick of the day in and day out grind of like running a newspaper, like, cause it's a 24-hour thing. Like you're never off. News always happens. And when the buck stops with you, everybody calls you. What do we do? How do we organize things? So she had about had enough of that and said, hey, you got to figure out something that's not as time consuming. And so the Enquirer job worked out good because it was still responsibility, but not as much as like running a newspaper.
And focused on a specific. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I was like, okay, cool. I'll come down and do that. Now, little did I know that they had already had a background plan that they didn't tell me about until I got down there. That while I was coming in as the deputy, the actual editor had her eyes on a different job. And as soon as
they
that
want
position,
to bring you in, see if you train, make sure everything's good, and then
and then promote me to the editor position. Right. So like 3 months after I'm there, like, hey, we got an idea. How would you like to run the section? Okay.
Basically, you got through your 90-day trial period, but you didn't know what was going on.
Exactly. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, sure, why not? And I've been doing that ever since, and I love it because I think it's a unique position to be in because you really get to hear the thoughts and the feelings of people in the area. It gives you great perspective. It can be sometimes scary, some of the things that you hear from people and to see inside the minds of some people can be disturbing at times, but it's largely a great privilege and has taught me so much and really kind of gives me a perspective that when I'm talking about issues, I certainly have my own views, but I think I am able to kind of articulate, even among people who I disagree with, where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. And my line is always, I don't have to agree with you, but if I can kind of understand how you arrive there, it helps me process things.
So this is 100%. One of my huge, I have many problems, but even initially with the concept of quote unquote social media, because the term media, it's interesting. Social media companies, they want to be a platform one day and a media company the next. But set that aside for a second. The idea of media is that there is some editorial control over it. When you move to the opinion of it, it's interesting because then you're delving over into that side where you need some moderation from the straight up crazy trolling stuff that happens. But to your point, hey, that's an important point, or that's somebody's point of view that I can at least see. Right. And we need to rise up, have a conversation about, see whether maybe he or she can bring somebody their way, or conversely, maybe you can do it. And it's such a fascinating, especially today, to be living in that world. I don't know if you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always tell people that you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts. So we do have to start out with whatever your opinion is. There has to be a baseline of factual representation. So you and I can look at and we can say, hey, there are 50 car accidents a week in Cincinnati, and that's it. That's a fact. But we can have different opinions on why that's the case and what needs to be done about it. So we can debate that. What we can't debate is the reality of 50 car crashes a week in Cincinnati.
There's 500. There's 5.
Yeah,
no, there's 50.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the baseline. Then when we get into the opinion, there are opinions that are valid, and then there are opinions that are just crazy. Okay, and I think that's the line. So I think anyone who would say their opinion is that the sky is blood red, assuming we don't have some sort of incident, we know the sky's kind of blue or whatever, science would say. So I think like people who want to espouse those types of opinions, I think news media in particular still has a responsibility to say, just because you have an opinion that is radically nonsensical doesn't mean that we have to platform it for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's the difference between media and social media. Social media doesn't have that filter. Anybody can get on social media and say whatever. You've got your page, you've got your whatever. You can go out there and say anything, and I guess that's fine. But I think those of us who work in respected and trusted platforms where we're expected to relay good information, I think you have to reject that kind of thing and not just say everybody's entitled to their opinion, because there are informed opinions and there are valid opinions, and then there's some crazy stuff out there that people say that's neither one of those things. they can say it, but I don't have to platform it for you. And that's not censorship.
That's exactly that's editorial.
Yes,
that's
that's editorial control. Yeah. That's I think responsible journalism, right?
Sure.
We have a responsibility to not put things out. Much like doctors. One of the premises of journalism is sort of the do no harm. Public's right to know versus do no harm. And I think sometimes in the media sphere, we do a lot of harm under this notion or pressure that people will try to put on you in terms of censorship, and everybody's opinion counts, and
everything is of equal weight.
Yes, right. And that's just simply just simply not true, and it shouldn't be true for news media platforms who have a responsibility to give people information that they need to be able to make the best and most informed decisions for their own safety and the safety and security of their families. And so there's
also to give voices to expertise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is another thing that gets discounted quite easily today.
Absolutely. Expertise, I think, is something that those who just want to say anything, kind of try to villainize and present it as elitism. I think one of the things that frustrates me the most about some of our conversation is like intelligence used to be something that we aspire to as a people. Now it is something that's vilified and called elitist because I want to be educated, because I want to know, because I want to be informed. There's nothing bad or elitist about that. In fact, I think it's something that we all should strive to do. I don't think any of us should be comfortable in our ignorance. And I think that this notion that somehow or another intellectualism or intelligence is elitism, I think is hogwash, quite frankly, and is not productive to, any dialogue that we're trying to have. Like, how can you dialogue with somebody who doesn't care whether they're ignorant or not?
And exactly, ignorance is the key word.
Yeah,
right, where people are truly ignorant of something. And you used to even watch. I rember thinking of even like politics or whatever back in the day. You would have people, whether it's a novel theory or things like that, but people who were well educated, well thought out, presenting something that you might not agree with, but they weren't frowned upon because they actually got educated.
Yeah, yeah,
You're right.
Yeah.
And we should not be vilifying education.
Yeah, and I get it. I think so. I think there's also probably to some degree this element of, and maybe this is where the elitism comes in, is that the making of feeling people who are less intelligent feel lower than, so you hear that from sometimes of people who feel like they're being talked down to or looked down upon because they may not have the same reservoir of information and facts as somebody else who's more educated or more in tune. And so I think we have to find a way in dialogue with those folks to say, hey, maybe you don't have all of the information, but you're not like a bad person, or you're not like somebody to be looked down upon because you don't have the information, but
And do you think some of it comes from, I know that there's always this pushback at university levels or whatever, where they feel like there's too much of a liberal bias, or this, like the other voices aren't heard. But my recollection, and again, you probably have your finger on it better than I do, is that there is definitely room to challenge and have different ideas voiced on college campuses. I don't think that has been shut down. I don't know what your view is these days.
Yeah, I as somebody who probably comes from what some people would say is probably a more liberal mindset, I would tend to agree with you, but I do talk to a lot of conservative people that I know and friends, some who work on college campuses and are a part of that community, who would say they absolutely feel like some things are oppressed and stifled. And maybe it's not even in like overt policy or anything like that, but it could be sort of like the sense of the culture that is created to where, if you do express views, you're sort of ostracized, or instead of just kind of having a vigorous debate about it, it becomes more of a separator, right?
Yeah.
In those instances. And I think that's the thing that you kind of have to be
sort of a litmus test.
Yeah, exactly.
In my experience, it's not even someone that makes someone feel bad. Those aren't even the truly educated people.
Right.
They're quasi-educated, they're semi-educated. So we're not talking about experts. We're just talking about these people with this fake erudition, that run around intentionally, trying to put people down. And that's where a lot of that elitism comes from as well.
Yeah. This is the question I have, though, because I find your job is fascinating, and that, where do you find, does an idea come to you, from putting yourself in situations, or are there times where, and I'm just pulling this out of my butt, but you're standing in line at Starbucks and you're like, why is this taking so long? And then something can spurn off of that in a larger scope of time waiting, and then how that's applied to other situations. But where does it come from?
Yeah, so I think even though I'm on the opinion side, I'm still a reporter at heart, and you never lose those things. Which observance observance and curiosity is a key part of being a really good reporter. It's looking around you, being observant of things that are around you, and always asking yourself the question, why is this? Why is this way? Or if somebody says something, what did they mean by that? I learned very early on, when somebody says something, especially if it's a particularly spicy or hot take, the next best question you can always ask them is, well, tell me what you mean by that, because often they will add more context that either changes or better helps you understand what it was,
or will really shine a light on what they meant by it.
And this is why I'm not a big fan of text messages or the way we communicate through social media, because if there's one thing I've learned over a career of writing, you cannot control how somebody interprets what they read. I mean, it's hard enough to understand for people they'll take what you say and run with it.
Communication in person is hard enough,
Right. But at least with the spoken word, you can interpret my tone. If I'm in front of you, you can sort of see body language. There are things that you can get from conversation that the written word leaves a lot of blanks in there. And so I see that a lot, that a lot of times when we're debating and people will say things and then people react very strongly to things, it's because they don't have a lot of times the full context, and we don't always express ourselves fully. A lot of times, unless we're able to sit in forums like this for a period of time, but most of our conversations are very quick. They're short interactions. They're online or whatever, 140 characters, whatever it is, or however much. And most of us, I find this too, that I'd much rather talk to you than sit down and write a column, because that's going to take time. It'll take me a minute to express a thought. But to sit down and actually write a 500 or 600 word column, that may take me all day unless I'm on a deadline, to sit down and thoughtfully do that, because now I've got to go over every word. I've got to think as I'm writing this, what is somebody reading this going to counter with? And then how do I even answer that as I'm formulating my thoughts here? These are all things that kind of go through my mind. So I'm having a conversation with sometimes an imaginary reader. And sometimes I've even developed this technique. I'll call up some people and I'll just talk through. I don't even tell them this is what I'm writing about. I'll just call them and I'll engage them in a conversation. See what they spit back. And that kind of helps me figure out okay, this is what somebody reading this might come back. But I might do that with 2 or 3 people if I have time to do it.
Right.
And it helps you better. It helps me better formulate my thoughts and come up with some of the arguments. So it is most often that way. It'll be something that either I've seen or I react to something in the news that's said that particularly hits me in a place. I don't write about everything, because there's some things I don't care about. It's that's the hardest thing. I'll just be honest. It's the hardest thing sometimes about editorial writing. When I have to write opinions on behalf of the paper, not just what I write under my own byline, but I got to be the voice of the Enquirer. And sometimes it's you're writing about something, you're like, man, I could care.
I really don't care.
I have zero passion for this thing, but I got to try to I try to write this, for the community, and that's hard to do. It's hard to write opinions when you don't particularly have a strong one about something. And that's why I'm glad we don't write them every day like we used to. It used to be back in the day you had to have an opinion every day. And I'm just here to tell you that if you've got 365 strong opinions, you probably got too much time on your hands.
Yeah, right.
You need to find some.
You're probably fooling yourself. And 150 of those are worthwhile.
Exactly.
Maybe.
Yeah. Get you something to do. Find some hobbies.
That's awesome.
So when you're sitting around and are people dropping ideas on your desk? I mean, do you have colleagues who come by and been like, Kevin, man, you got to get them. They got to be, right? They're irritated about something. They have your ear, and they're like, Kevin, man.
Colleagues, family members,
driving
friends.
You crazy. And like, I really can't write an opinion column about the trash pickup on your street.
Yeah. Right. I mean, and I get it because, and I say this all the time to people, and people's priorities are their priorities, right? Not necessarily your priorities or the newspaper's priorities. So grandma turning 100 years old, I get it, is a big deal in your family, and it should be. Right. But that doesn't mean that, 500,000 people need to know about that or care about that. And so I always try to be respectful when people bring ideas that not because they aren't important. I'd never tell somebody it wasn't important.
Sure.
I would just say, the things that we have to look at is scope and
this
impact.
Isn't the forum for it.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. I mean, I get that stuff all the time. Like,
and then you got that friend that's like, come on, Kev, I told you, man, is it Skyline or Camp Washington Chili? Which one?
Which is it, Kevin? Man? Come on, man.
So at the risk of offending anybody in Camp Washington.
There we go. We got a hot take coming.
Not the Camp Washington Chili. I'm a Skyline guy. I hope my doctor is not listening to this, but I hit Skyline at least once a week. Like that is if I'm not at Skyline at least once a week, get my 4-way and my cheese coney, I feel like I've cheated myself.
I'm going to have to run over to Camp Washington.
There you go.
Yeah. That's because.
Yeah, we got some graders. Is that your
UDF?
What is your?
I gotta stay out of graders, man. I mean, graders will get you killed. I mean, no. So there's another hot take for the. Hey, man, look, my dad was a diabetic, so I gotta watch my. But graders, man, graders is dangerous. I mean, their ice cream.
I just got told a story. My company, we have an office in Atlanta. We had a meeting up here, and I took the guys to Graders, and they were like, "This is the best thing I've ever had." Yeah. So I guess through Kroger's now you can go into a Kroger in Atlanta and buy Graders. So this guy's son takes a girl on a date, and they had dinner, and they were going to get dessert. He goes, "You hang on." So for dessert, they went to Kroger's, got a black raspberry chip, and shared it for their dessert. I was like, that is the best date story kind of from Cincinnati I'd ever heard. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I did not get a chance to test the Skyline Graders ice cream. The one time that I was going to get it, I was in a Skyline downtown, and I was going to order it, but they didn't have it yet. I think this was like right after it had first come out, and they, for some reason, didn't have the permission to release it on that particular day that I was in there. So, and I just haven't gotten around to trying to sample it.
You're a braver man than me.
But
so
you're going to
have to write
obligated
you have to write
it.
about that for us because I'm not quite sure I can tuck into a pint of Skyline Graders.
You can call me while writing.
You can't love Skyline and you can't love Graders and not try Grader Skyline ice cream. I mean, if just to say you did it.
I'm pretty sure that's what they were banking on. Well, as we kind of wrap this up, Tim always has some questions he likes to throw at our guests. So
I do. As a Cincinnati sports fan, you get one jersey to wear. What jersey would it be, and whose name would be on it?
Ooh, that's a tough one. So not as far as the team goes.
Sure.
I'm a diehard Bengals fan. Look, I live, eat, sleep, breathe.
Okay.
Bengals. I love it. My Bengals. My man cave in my house is a shrine to the Cincinnati Bengals. There's probably not a piece of Bengals memorabilia that I don't own. Look, I was out at Trader's World probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 months ago, and some guy had this wooden Bengal tiger that he had for sale.
Is this like folk art? Like he made himself?
Yeah, like he's selling belt buckles and hats, and he's got this wooden tiger over in the corner. And I see this thing as I'm walking by. I gotta have that. I gotta have that thing. I mean, this thing is like the size of a pretty good sized dog. And I'm like, I gotta have that thing. I gotta have that for my man cave. So I went, and I don't even know if it was for sale, but you know how it is when you get anything that's in that booth, you could probably negotiate.
It's all for sale in there. It's just a matter of price, right?
Yeah. So my wife saw me going for it, and my wife always negotiates because I'm a sucker. If I want something, I don't care how much it is. I'm not negotiating. I'm not trying to get. If I want it and I got the money, I'm gonna get it.
That's $3,000. I got it here, right?
Exactly. So my wife knows this about me, so she sees this and she's like,
recognizes the glint in your eye.
She's like, I got it. So she goes over and like negotiates with the guy. I don't know what he started out with, but we wound up getting it for like $100, and so now this thing is down in my
$100 and a couple column inches.
Yeah. So if it was $100, I'm sure it was probably like $250. The way my wife, she drives a hard. Hamilton County could use my wife down there negotiating the stadium lease right now.
Because she went, nobody needs that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. She would get the county a deal. So if anybody in the county is looking for a negotiator, Nicole Aldridge is your person. But I love Joe Burrow and I love Jamar Chase. It would be tough for me to choose like which one. I mean,
sure.
Joe Burrow is both of them are just phenomenal players. I mean, they're generational talents.
And here's the thing. It's very rare that you see two generational talents that 1 + 1 actually equals 3.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, seriously, right?
Absolutely.
Each one of them will elevate somebody else around them, fair enough. But you're talking about two generational people, and those two together are so special.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
I mean, I guess if I had to split the difference, then I would say T. Higgins because
somebody's got to go across the middle.
Absolutely. I mean, T. Higgins is a great talent in and of himself, but I like T. Higgins, the person. Not that I don't like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, the person, but I just think T. Higgins is such a genuine, nice young man. I mean, he's grew up a Bengals fan, so what a great story that is for him.
I'm so happy they got him.
Yeah, me too.
I was afraid he was going to get lost in that. They did it. Got Joe, now we got Jamar, and T was going to be the guy left out, and they didn't do that. I give him a lot of credit for that.
Yep. So that'll be my answer. Well, let's go with T. Higgins.
Okay.
My buddy bought me a Sam Hubbard jersey for my 50th birthday. I don't know. No offense to Sam Hubbard. I don't know why he would think that a 94 jersey would look good on. I need like a singular number on. Like 94. I'm not built like a 94 guy.
Right.
Like, come on, man. He was like, well, I figured I'd get you a jersey I didn't think you had. Well, that was a pretty good guess because
if that was the criteria, you get it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Do you see us winning a Super Bowl in the next 4 years?
God, I hope so. I mean, I was just telling
this
somebody,
is the window, man.
This is the window. They got to do it. They got to draft well the next couple of years because they got so much money tied up in their
defense.
Their main players.
We proved last year that you just can't outscore everybody. You got to stop them.
Yeah, they don't even need to be like.
They don't need to be great.
Yeah, they just need to be like 17, 8, like where they're drafting in the draft. Like that's where they need to be in the defensive rankings.
Yes.
I think if they could get
because you can't put up 35 and lose.
Right,
that's not going to get it done.
You just got to come up with our offense. You just got to be able to come up with a couple of stops in key moments. Yes. And if they can do that, I absolutely think that with the talent that they've got, they definitely can win a Super Bowl. I think I feel more confident. I haven't felt this confident since the first couple years of Carson Palmer. I mean, Carson Palmer, when he came in, he was that kind of Joe Burrow. Yeah.
This was Carson and Marvin's first period of time there, and that whole group, and you really felt like these are the guys who can take it.
Yeah. When that year that he got his knee. That was their year. I think that was our year.
Down goes Palmer. Yeah, that was it, man.
Yeah. It reminds me of when Kenyon Martin blew out his knee. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. That was heartbreaking.
That was the season for them to go all the way, right? I mean, I think it was his knee, wasn't it? It was Kenyon Martin's knee.
It was like his knee or his foot, something in his leg.
That was the year. I thought, man, that was for all that whole group, the whole program. I thought that was the year that really got lost.
Yeah. But the short answer is, I think we got it. I think we've got enough to get there. Yeah.
That's awesome.
All right.
Well, I can't wait to check out a Kings game, man. when I'm back in town. Seriously, that'll be that's
absolutely.
awesome.
No, we're definitely going to do that because we're all sports fans here. Like I said, we this thing kind of came to be on the, going to us just high school buddies going to a Reds game. So
I always tell people to come check it out. Because like a lot of times when you start saying minor league sports, like people have a vision in their mind of like, oh yeah, I could get out there and play with those guys. No, you can't. I mean, there's definitely levels to it, and people will walk away from it sort of saying like, well, why isn't that guy somewhere? And it gives you an appreciation for how great the elite athletes are, because to make it to that NBA level, you have to be the best of the best, because there are a whole bunch of guys who are underneath them who are really good that you would say to yourself like, man, why aren't these guys playing at a higher level?
I worked with a guy who in his youth, I don't know, drove like Formula 3000 or whatever the thing is below Formula 1. Mm-hmm. And he worked his way up and gotten into that. And then whatever, now he's managing entertainment systems on cruise ships. Everybody was like, what, dude, what's wrong with you? Why would you leave that? And he said, let me tell you. He said, from our group, he said, if you're in the top 3, you can go on and be in the bottom 20 over there and maybe make it a couple years, and they're going to cycle you through. He says to get from the top 20 to the top 10 to the top 5 to the top 3 to number 1. He said there are so many steps, and that's where and it's exactly what you're talking about. He said, now, when we go on the go-kart track together, I'll kill all of you because you can't come out here and play with us.
Right.
He said, but you put one of those guys next to me and I lose every time.
Yeah.
And it's the different, but it's the talent, but it's fun to watch.
It is absolutely fun to watch. And the league that we play in, the rules, if you know anything about the old school ABA, they had, which is the league that we play in. So red, white, and blue basketball, Dr. J, all of that old thing. They used to have unique rules that they would play by in that league, and this league is the same way. It follows in that same tradition, and there are some unique rules that make the pace of play faster, higher points scored. So it's really exciting basketball. Yeah. It's fun to watch, and what I always tell people is it's family friendly. Like, we put a lot of time and energy and effort in making this an experience that, hey, if you're a family and you got a couple of kids that, you're looking for something to do, this is like a really cheap night out.
Yeah.
If you want, our
Try
tickets
going to
are
a movie or anywhere, and you're dropping tons of money.
Yeah. I mean, we tickets are $10.
Yeah.
We used to run. We haven't done this in the last couple of seasons, but we used to try to create value for people. So we had partnerships with local barbers who would come and they would cut hair at the game. So if you brought your kid to a game,
that's a great promotion. I like that.
You get a free haircut.
Yeah.
So the first year that we did it, we gave out something like 200 haircuts to kids,
fantastic.
free haircuts to kids, and then we created courtside seating that we had that came with VIP. So like for $20, you could get unlimited concessions in a VIP area that we have for fans, along with the courtside seats. So we tried to build in value. Of course, kids under 12 get in free. So to our game. So people with real little kids, you don't have to worry about that being a price impediment for you to get into our games. We want young kids to come and experience it and have a good time.
Even like the next level up, we used to take our kids down to Cyclones games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was a blast. I mean, it was just a lot of fun. It was inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
But
totally.
The people out there playing, that's the hardest working group of people you're going to see play, right? And they're out there loving it.
Yes.
Right? Either on their way up or, like you said, maybe on the tail end of something, but they're out there for the right reasons.
Absolutely. And our guys get paid too. I mean, I always say, no, you're not going to be able to quit your day job, to play for the Ohio Kings. But I wish somebody like that Kevin
to play basketball.
Yeah, that Kevin from Wittenberg who wished there was an Ohio somebody who was going to give me some money to come out and play for a couple of hours on a Saturday.
Free?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like, man, where were guys like me at when I was coming out of college? So please come out, and it's a great time, and you'll enjoy it. We'd love to see you.
I look forward to meeting you in person too, man.
Yeah, same here.
All right. Well, thanks for coming in, man. We
really
appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
The NattyCast is proudly brought to you by Pago Lago Productions. The show is hosted by Tim Barker, Rex Stull, and Ron Thomas. Produced and edited by Matthew Lake and associate produced by Ethan Spanja. Special thanks to Sadie Kern at Pop Gun Flow for the graphics and to Brando Triantafilu for the original theme song. Feel free to follow us at _NattyCast on Instagram or head to our website, thenattycast.com. You can get this show wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next time.